Members of council, if I can please have you take your seats. I will call this meeting to order. Would you please stand for the national anthem?
Ton bras s'est porté les pays, il s'est porté la croix. Ton histoire est une épopée des plus brillants exploits. God keep our land glorious and free. Oh Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Please remain standing for a moment of silence, and during this time, remember Kyle Howard Muthuleng. Thank you. We acknowledge Members of council, there's no applauding in the council chambers, and if that happens again, I will ask the council chambers to be vacated. Those are the rules. Please. Point of order, Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you. I'd just like to point out to all of those here today that in days like this, we always use our jazz hands, so you can stay with us in the council chambers for the whole morning.
We acknowledge the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by the Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. For the benefit of those who are connected to the internet, the city clerk has posted all of the agenda materials for today's meeting at www.toronto.ca/council. This special meeting of council is scheduled for the following purposes: to consider the city solicitor's report from item CC 45.1 on legal options to challenge Bill 5, the Better Local Government Act 2018, and to introduce and enact general bills, and to introduce and enact a confirming bill for this special meeting. Members of council, as this is a special meeting under council's procedures, no new business items such as notices of motions may be introduced. This rule cannot be waived. Members, I would like to call upon Mayor Tory to address council.
Well, good morning, Madam Speaker, and I wanted to take a moment before the meeting proceeds, especially to address the public in the gallery and those following at home, to explain what is about to happen, because there's been quite a bit of discussion about this over the last number of days. Today, as you mentioned, Madam Speaker, we have convened a special session of the Council in response to the introduction of new provincial legislation that cuts the size of the City Council to 25. Every single person in this room takes their duty to the people of Toronto seriously. The councillors in this room all put themselves forward for public office, and our city staff serve us and serve the public every single day, and both groups are dedicated to the best interests of the people and of the city government. We take the representation of Toronto citizens seriously. We take the governance of the city seriously. And while we as a municipality must always acknowledge that we exist and operate within the context of a Canadian Constitution, it is our duty to represent the people of Toronto and the best interests of the city at all times, and to make our opinions known and our positions heard when we do not believe that the actions of other levels of government are in our city's best interests. The majority of council has been very clear about its position, as I have been as mayor and as the head of the council. The process by which this monumental change was made was wrong and is unacceptable. So today we will have a public meeting. We will also go in camera to discuss the legal advice of the city solicitor related to Bill 5, which is the act of the provincial legislature that makes this change. I think it is obvious to most people why, when we're discussing the strengths and weaknesses of our legal position, asking questions about legal strategy and things like that, that those discussions should be confidential. We will later have a public discussion. The rapid introduction of this legislation has put everyone in a complex and unprecedented situation: our solicitor and her team, our city clerk, and those who are preparing for the October 22nd election, our staff and elected officials, and all of those who put forward their names as candidates for the elections this fall. So we're going to discuss our city's options in relation to the legal advice the city solicitor has provided and will provide in answer to questions today. And then we're going to come back to public session to decide on motions that will direct our city's response to this legislation. The City of Toronto is home to nearly 3 million people. The City Council and the Mayor are here to represent all of those people, every single one of them, and to make sure that decisions that affect our city and our residents are done right, and that we make our position known clearly and with determination. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? Are there any petitions at this time? Councillor Cressy.
Thank you, Speaker. I have two petitions I'd like to submit. First, I'm rising to deliver the signatures of 1,884 residents from Ward 20 who are opposed to Ford's Bill 5. And secondly, I'm rising to deliver the signatures of 535 additional residents from Ward 20 who are asking the Mayor and City Council to stand up today to vote against Bill 5 and to pursue legal action. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Campbell.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. I have a petition from 1,084 residents from Etobicoke who are opposed to Bill 5. And I'll paraphrase a little bit of the rest of the text. It says, they want the Premier to refrain from using his power as Premier by, quote, messing with Toronto's political system in the middle of an election. And they want, end of quote, and they want the Premier to keep his hands off Toronto. The second one is 282 residents, also from Etobicoke, asking Mayor Tory and Toronto City Council to vote today to stand up to the province. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Councillor Matlow.
Madam Speaker, I have two petitions against Premier Ford's Bill 5 from Ward 22, one of which is of 262 residents from Ward 22 who are asking Mayor Tory and Toronto City Council to vote today to stand up to Doug Ford and oppose Bill 5. I have another one, which I'm rising to deliver the signatures of 865 residents from Ward 22 who are opposed to Bill 5 and would like Toronto City Council to take a strong challenge in court.
Thank you. Councillor Perks.
Thank you, Speaker, and good morning. I rise with two petitions. The first is 1,141 residents of Ward 14 who are opposed to Bill 5, and the second is 307 residents from Ward 14 that include the following. Dear Mayor Tory and councillors, I am writing to ask that Monday's meeting, item CC 45.1, that I stand up and against Doug Ford by voting and encouraging other councillors to vote for the city to defend itself and challenge Bill 5 in court.
Thank you. Councillor Dissette.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and good morning, everyone. I proudly stand this morning to present two petitions from Ward 13, soon to be Ward 17. The first one I have is that Ford should stop abusing his powers as a Premier, and basically, as Councillor Campbell says, residents wanting to keep his hands off Toronto. For this, I have 822 signatures.
Councillor Dissett, okay. Councillor Mamalidi, your point of privilege.
You know, I know that people might be upset with respect to what's going on, but the name Ford, I mean, for me, he's the premier of this province, and there needs to be a bit of respect
Councillor
with the title.
Mamalidi, that's,
And it just seems to me that this petition is
Councillor Mamalidi.
disrespectful to the premier of the province.
Councillor Mamalidi, that is not a point of privilege. Councillor Wong Tam? Oh, sorry, did you have another one? Yes.
And all I'm doing, Councillor, is reading what the petition says. The other one, again, proud to stand today from 264 residents of Ward 13, soon to be Ward 17, asking this council to do legal action and fight against Bill 5. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wong Tam?
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And I'm rising on behalf of the constituents in Ward 28, 1,141 residents from Ward 28 who are opposed to Mr. Ford's Bill 5. They want Mr. Ford to stop abusing his power as premier by messing with Toronto's political system in the middle of an election, and they want Mr. Ford to keep his hands off Toronto. I'm also rising, Madam Speaker, to deliver the signatures of 1,513 residents from Ward 27 who are opposed to Mr. Ford's Bill 5, and I won't read that again, but that's 2 petitions right there. The third petition, Madam Speaker, is I'm rising to deliver the signatures of 752 residents from Ward 27 and 28 who are asking Mayor Tory and Toronto City Council to stand up to Mr. Doug Ford. They are including, and they're asking us for the following. Dear Mayor Tory and councillors, I'm writing to ask that on Monday's meeting, you vote to stand up to Mr. Doug Ford's by voting and encouraging the other councillors to vote for, and the city to defend itself and challenge Bill 5 in court. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Ainsley?
Good morning, Madam Speaker. I have a petition of 675 residents that include wards 35, 36, 37, 38, and 43 that they want Premier Ford to stop abusing his power as Premier by messing with Toronto's political system in the middle of an election, and they want Premier Ford to keep his hands off of Toronto.
Councillor Fragadakis?
Thanks, Madam Speaker, and good morning. I also am in receipt of 2 petitions. One is 693 signatures, residents from Ward 29 who were opposed to Ford's Bill 5, and the other one is 161 signatures from residents of Ward 29 who are asking Mayor Tory and Toronto City Council to vote today to stand up to Doug Ford.
Councillor Davis?
Thank you, Speaker. I am rising today to deliver 3 petitions. The first is of 487 residents from Ward 31 who are opposed to Doug Ford's Bill 5. They want Doug Ford to stop abusing his power as Premier by messing with Toronto's political system in the middle of an election and to keep his hands off Toronto. I also have a petition from the residents of Ward 32, 1,092, who say the same thing. Stop messing with Toronto. And the third one is from residents, 427 residents in Wards 31 and 32 who are calling on Mayor Tory and Toronto City Council to vote today to stand up to Doug Ford and to defend itself and challenge Bill 5 in court. Thank you. That's a total of 1,996 people.
Thank you. Councillor Shan?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have 2 sets of petitions as well. First set from 323 members, residents of Scarborough, who are opposed to Premier Ford's Bill 5. They want Premier to stop abusing his powers as a Premier by messing with Toronto's political system in the middle of an election, and they want Premier Ford to keep his hands off Toronto. That's 323 from Scarborough. And I also have 275 more petitions from Scarborough asking the Mayor and the City Council to vote today to stand up to Doug Ford's Bill 5. The text includes, Dear Mayor, Tory, and councillors, I'm writing to ask that at Monday's meeting, item CC 45.1, you vote to stand up to Premier Doug Ford by voting for and encouraging other councillors to vote for the city to defend itself and challenge Bill 5 in court. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mihevik.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I have several petitions here that I'd like to present. They are similar to the previous ones, but I think given that they've signed them, they're worth reading out. From the good residents of Ward 21, 1,289 residents from Ward 21 who are opposed to Bill 5. They want Ford to stop abusing his power as Premier by messing with Toronto's political system in the middle of an election, and they want the Premier to keep his hands off of Toronto. That's 1,289 signatures. I have a similar petition from 937 residents from Midtown and North York who are asking our mayor and city council to vote today to stand up to Doug Ford. And they include in their correspondence the following. Dear Mayor Tory and councillors, I am writing to ask that at Monday's meeting you vote to stand up to Doug Ford by voting for and encouraging other councillors to vote for the city to defend itself and challenge Bill 5 in court. Those are those petitions, and I also have similar petitions from the good residents of Ward 11 and 12, 268 signatures, from Wards 15, 16, 695 signatures, from Ward 24, 153 signatures, and from Wards 33 and 34, 277 signatures, all saying basically the same thing. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Councillor Al-Jamari.
Thank you. I have a petition of residents in wards, excuse me, 9 and 10, who take great exception to the timing and lack of consultation, the provincial Bill 5, and I'd like to submit that to the clerk. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is that okay?
Thank you. Councillor Fillion.
Thank you. I'm rising to deliver the signatures of 316 residents from Ward 23 who are opposed to Doug Ford's Bill 5, and many of these people, in fact, voted for Doug Ford.
Please. Councillor Bailao.
Madam Speaker, I have three petitions. The first one I would like to present has 1,157 signatures from residents in Ward 18 in opposition of Bill 5. The next one has 585 signatures from residents in Ward 17 in opposition of Bill 5. And the third one, it has 481 signatures asking us to stand up today and vote for a legal challenge. And these are residents from Ward 17, 18, 11, and 12.
Councillor Perruzza.
Thank you, Speaker. I too have a heavy petition, and it's good to see that while I've been out talking to people about how to end the tyranny that is in Ward 7 known as Mamaliti, some other folks have been out there actually getting petitions signed that read as follows. That they want Ford to stop abusing his power as Premier by messing with Toronto's political system in the middle of an election. And they want Premier Ford to keep his hands off Toronto. And I submit to Speaker.
Councillor Fletcher. Councillor Mamaliti, please. Councillor Perruzza, fine, thank you. And Councillor Mamaliti, please stop interrupting. Councillor Fletcher, you got the floor.
I'm just waiting for Councillor Mamaliti to finish.
Okay, Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, I'm very proud this morning to rise and deliver the signatures of 1,260 residents from Ward 30 who are opposed to Premier Doug Ford's Bill 5, and they want Doug Ford to stop abusing his power as Premier by messing with Toronto's political system in the middle of an election, and they want the Premier to keep his hands off Toronto. Also rising to deliver the signatures of another 305 residents from Ward 30 who are asking the Mayor and City Council to stand up today, and they've said, "Dear Meritorian councillors, I'm writing to ask that at Monday's meeting, item CC 45.1, you vote to stand up to Doug Ford by voting for and encouraging other councillors to vote for the city to defend itself and challenge Bill 5 in court." I also, on behalf of my seatmate, and, who's asked me to do these, because he's shy, that's Councillor Burnside, raising today to deliver the signatures of 531 residents from Wards 25 and 26 who are opposed to Bill 5, and again, they wish to deliver the message to ask the Premier to keep his hands off Toronto.
Councillor Layton.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I rise today to deliver the signatures of 4,522 residents from Ward 19 and across the GTA who are opposed to Bill 5. They want Ford to stop abusing his power as Premier by messing with Toronto's political system in the middle of an election, and they want Ford to keep his hands off Toronto. I have a second petition signed by 842 individuals from Ward 19 and across the GTA who are asking Mayor Tory and Toronto City Council to vote today to stand up to Doug Ford. This includes the following: that, dear Mayor Tory and councillors, I am writing to ask that on Monday's meeting you vote to stand up to Doug Ford by voting for and encouraging other councillors to vote for the city to defend itself and challenge Bill 5 in court. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mamlidi.
Madam Speaker, during the last week, the Premier had suggested that we try and deal with the guns and gangs issues at this particular meeting. Instead, we've chosen to move forward with the don't touch my the political job whining session today.
Yeah.
Is it appropriate for me to actually move adjournment so that we can deal with guns and gangs instead of crying about our jobs?
Councillor Mamlidi, it is out of order. Thank you. Are there any all those in favor of receiving the petitions, recorded vote. Councillor Mamlidi, please. We can't add any other items on the agenda.
The motion to receive the petition carries. The vote is 39 to 1.
We will now review and Councillor Mamlidi.
It's my understanding of the rules of order that a motion to adjourn is always in order. And I stood up with the attempt to move that motion. And it's my right as a councillor to move that motion. And I'd like to do that at this particular time, just based on the bylaw that exists.
Councillor Mamlidi, I know you were here at the beginning of the meeting. We did say that we're here to discuss the one item only, and not any other motions or items to be added on the agenda. Councillor Mamlidi, stop interrupting, please. Okay, we have a motion by Councillor Mamalidi to adjourn the meeting. Recorded vote.
The motion to adjourn the meeting does not carry. The vote is 7 to 33.
We will now review and confirm the order paper. Once the order paper has been approved by council, any change will need a two-thirds vote. We have one item before us. The city solicitor and the city clerk have also submitted supplementary reports on this item. Those reports were distributed to you on Friday. No other business can be added to this meeting. We are scheduled to meet until 8 p.m. tonight. Council will reconvene tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. if necessary. All those in favor of adopting the order paper, recorded vote. Yes.
Councillor Robinson, please.
The motion to adopt the order paper carries. The vote is 38 to 3.
Okay, before we start, I just want to make a few comments. I appreciate how passionate many of us are in this room and feel about this issue and its impact on our city. I would like to start by reminding everyone to be respectful of each other and the senior staff that are here today as we consider this item. I would also like to express my thanks to the city solicitor and city clerk for their hard work in delivering these reports under short timelines. The city clerk is in a difficult position as Bill 5 received royal assent on August 14th, and she is legally required to implement a 25-ward model in the 2018 municipal election at this point. As a result, motions giving instructions to the city clerk on the election are not in order, as the clerk administers the election in accordance with the Municipal Elections Act without the involvement of city council. Now let's turn to debate on the item before us. So, questions, Councillor Perks.
Thank you, Speaker. On a point of order, I've spoken to the mayor and numerous members of council today and in the days leading up to this. The issues we have in front of us, some of them are public, some of them are private, and all of them are entwined. In some meetings of council, we have begun in public session, allowed questions in public session to establish the information we need to go in private, gone in private, and then come back out and continued in public session with that information in hand. We've done that on numerous occasions, and I was wondering if you could give us an indication if you would be prepared to proceed on that basis in this meeting.
Yes, so what I would like to suggest is that we're starting the public session first with questions, so we can have members of council put their name up to for public questions. We'll go in camera. When we come out of camera, we'll go back in public, so there would be an opportunity to ask questions following the in-camera session.
Thank you, Speaker.
Okay. So we'll go to questions to staff.
Only speak once, though. Only speak once.
Councillor Mihevik?
My apologies. As is our custom, there are at least two elected officials in the room that I think would be appropriate to acknowledge. One is Jill Andrews and Rima Burns-McCowan from the provincial legislature who are here. And
Joe Butilla.
And Butilla from Parkdale High Park as well. I know that I speak for all of us in welcoming them to our council chambers.
Speak to my microphone.
Thank you. One,
My microphone.
Councillor Shiner?
Madam Speaker, I would not like to go in camera at all today. This report has already been circulated to the media. They have already written about it in the newspapers, and it's there. The people of the City of Toronto deserve a right to understand the legal opinions and the comments that have been given to us by staff And I believe that this report itself now could be out in the public, and I would like to deal with it as such in the public. And I would then move a motion that the report then be put in public, if that's appropriate. So we can have one round of questions and people can understand our questions and the advice that we're being given.
Okay, Councillor Perks, you want to
Speak
make
to Councillor Shiner's
speak on
motion.
that? Yes.
I believe I have 3 minutes.
Yeah, yes.
Procedure? Yeah.
3 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Speaker. And while I agree with Councillor Shiner that the report is public and our advice to the clerk and the solicitor at the end of the day should be made public, there are questions about the legal strategy that we might want to pursue. There are questions about the risk of different options of the legal strategy we might want to pursue. There's advice we might want to get on what directions to give the solicitor that we do not want the province of Ontario to know at this point. So my very strong feeling is that we proceed, as you said in the beginning, and we have questions in the public session. Then we go in camera to ask for that sensitive and confidential advice, not direction, advice about what pathway is most effective. And then we come back out in public session. At that time, if Councillor Shiner wants to move to make the report public and to make any instructions we gave the clerk public, I would support it at that time.
Thank you. Yes, okay, Councillor Mamlidi to speak on Councillor Shiner's motion.
Yeah, I too would agree with Councillor Shiner's motion and would be supporting it. You just need to read the paper, and I think most people here have read the report, and I think most people here understand where the legal advice is going with us. And I think most people here are ready with their motions anyway. And I think most people here want to just move on, move your motions, and deal with them here on the council floor, so that everybody in this city can find out what that's about. I think moving into camera may be necessary if you've got something up your sleeve, but at the end of the day, I think the public should hear right away what those motions are, and let's deal with it. Let's just move on to this election instead of whining about our political jobs and the potential of us losing our political jobs.
Sorry, Speaker, I don't know where to put my name.
Sorry, in the middle, Councillor Fletcher. Councillor Fletcher?
Well, Councillor DiCiano has got his name first. Would you like me to go? or-
Okay, well, his name was just added on. Okay. Okay, let's go to Councillor DiCiano. Councillor DiCiano, on Councillor Shiner's motion.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like everyone to support Councillor Shiner's motion. It's fairly clear that these in-camera sessions add little value to any debate since everything goes public anyways. So let's get on with it. It's all about the election anyways. People are here to watch and hear the debate. So I'd encourage everybody to vote for Councillor Shiner's motion.
Councillor Shiner, a point of order?
Yes, Madam Speaker. My motion was that the report become public and we ask our questions in public, but it doesn't prevent us, if this council so wish later, to have an in-camera session. I never said that we never go in camera, but there's a report that's already out in the media and it's public, and we want to ask questions as to what it says, and the people of Toronto deserve at least to understand what's in the report in front of us. But nowhere did I move a motion, which is what this debate is about, that we never go on camera. That's council's privilege.
Thank you. But Councillor Shiner, the direction that I indicated at the beginning is that we would ask questions in public, then we would go on camera, then we would come back in public and ask questions. So that was the direction that I indicated at the beginning of the meeting. Yes.
My motion was, Councillor Davis, please. I do not stand up when you speak and yell in your ear.
Okay, Councillor Shiner, please, through the
That this
chair.
report become public and we can ask questions on this report from the solicitor in public. And that is what my motion is.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Shiner. Councillor Fletcher?
Number one, I like to go into camera and get advice from the clerk and determine a direction from the amount of advice the clerk has given us, saying you can do this or that. I think I'm happy to hear from the clerk after we're finished in camera, if this report can be public. That is what we often do. I think a long-serving councillor would know that you go in camera, and then if you wish a report to be public after, it can be. But right now, I think we have a duty to listen to the possible advice from the clerk and then come back out and ask any other questions. So I don't understand why Councillor Shiner feels that he has to change the direction that we just said earlier in the day, Madam Speaker, that you set yourself here. And I think the good people of Toronto would like to make sure we're making well-considered decisions, and they know how things work at the city. What they'd really like is, I won't say what they'd really like, Speaker, but what I'd really like.
Thank you. Just on the motion, thank you. Okay, members of council, we do want to start the agenda as soon as possible. Councillor Holliday.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just rise to support Councillor Shiner's motion as well to make this report public. This report is not heavy. It is clear and plain, and I am convinced that the information here is something that would benefit the public and would be very quickly well known should council select to give the solicitor direction. It would become very apparent immediately. And so, therefore, I don't see there's a heavy reason for us to keep it secret. It should be out in the open, and it should inform our debate today. Thank you.
Councillor Wong-Tam.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I rise to express my opposition to having this debate in public at this particular point in time. The subject matter before us is about solicitor-client privilege, and oftentimes we have stayed in camera to discuss sensitive matters, whether it's human resources, employment relations, and any other type of matters, especially pertaining to legal matters and pending legal challenges. It is concerning, Madam Speaker, that the media has already seen perhaps a copy of this document. It is concerning to me, Madam Speaker, because that means that somebody here would have leaked the document already to the media, working against the city's interests, working against council's interests, and working against the interests of the public. And that, to me, Madam Speaker, is probably one of the more dangerous things that have already taken place. I've spoken to a number of lawyers, whether it's lawyers that are working towards supporting the legal injunction, lawyers who are working on a charter challenge, lawyers who are working on a class action, and none of those lawyers are standing up to project their legal strategy for the public to consume.
Okay, Councillor Wong-Tam, we're discussing Councillor Shiner's motion only.
Yes.
We'll get into the contents later.
Every word I've said, Madam Speaker, relates directly to the intention that Councillor Shiner has put forward. And for those reasons, Madam Speaker, I cannot support going into public session to discuss a confidential legal matter. Thank you.
Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Speaker. I too rise to oppose Councillor Shiner's motion. Why in the world would we give away our legal strategy before we even begin? That is why we have to hear this and have opportunities in private so that we can get a better and deeper understanding of the advice that is contained in what is actually a very short report, and why we would ever allow our opponents to have access to our legal advice is beyond me. I think the motion to make this public is about sabotaging the city's position, and that is unethical. It doesn't represent the interests of this city, and I find it shocking.
Thank you. Councillor Doucette.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I will actually be very quick. There was another supplementary report with a purple paper provided us on Friday. Whoever gave our purple papers to a Toronto Star, failed to give that one. We may have private questions on that, so therefore I do support going in camera. We will see at that point in time if we want to release everything to the public. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fillion?
Thank you. Councillor Perks had it right. Obviously, we need to be able to go in camera to determine what our strategy is away from the eye of the province who we will be, I hope, opposing on this. And we can, if the motion carries, we won't be able to get that legal advice in camera, and that's certainly not about transparency. The only transparent thing about it is it's a rather transparent attempt to cozy up to Mr. Doug Ford.
Councillor DeGiorgio.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I also want to rise and support our going into camera to debate, or at least to ask questions of staff. In my mind, there seems to be a lot of agreement with respect to the right of the Premier to do what he is doing. The question is really implementation and whether we can actually affect the implementation process. And that's really what the strategy is around. It has nothing to do with the right of the Premier to do what he's doing. So in that context, I think we need to ask staff what strategy may be appropriate in terms of delaying the implementation of what the Premier intends to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we have the motion. Deputy Mayor Minnan-Wong?
My preference would be to consider this question after we come out of camera and we ask our question. And so I would be okay with that. And I've only had a brief conversation with the clerk. I'm just wondering is there a motion that could be considered that would in fact operationalize that so we could go into camera without making the report public, and then just consider this after we come out of camera.
On releasing the confidential
That's right.
report, yes.
Yes.
Okay, so the motion that we have before us now is that Councillor Shiner is asking that the confidential report be made public now. And Deputy Mayor Minnan-Wong, you're suggesting after we come out of camera, yeah, so the thing is that you can't amend the motion, so if that's what the wish, because if you amend it, okay, sorry, go ahead.
So I am not comfortable releasing the report now.
Yeah.
But once this motion, if this motion is considered by council and it fails now, you can't bring it back after we go into camera, because that would be a motion that would be already have been considered by the council. Is that correct?
So your motion, if Councillor Shiner's motion gets defeated, then your motion, I believe, would be in order, that the confidential report be made public once we come out of camera.
So that would be a motion that we could, after we come out of camera, could be moved again?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we could vote against this and then consider it again after we come out of camera? Yes.
Okay, so we have the motion. The clerk will put the motion on the screen. Yes, recorded vote. Yes, recorded vote.
Councillor Burnside, please.
Councillor Wong-Tam and Councillor Perruzza, please.
The motion does not carry. The vote is 13 to 28.
Okay, so now we'll start. Okay, Councillor Cressy is moving to reopen. All in favor? Carried. Let's redo the vote again. Recorded vote. Watch those fingers.
The motion does not carry. The vote is 11 to 30.
Okay, so now we'll start. And questions, put your name under request to question staff. Councillor Fletcher, you're up.
Yes,
You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. I'm just questioning on this public report that we have here, CC 45. And I just want to be really clear about Bill 5 eliminates the city's authority to establish, divide, redivide, or configure its wards and sets the number of councillors at 25. So just to be clear, I guess it would be from the city solicitor, that has been eliminated from our wheelhouse, essentially.
Yes, through you, Madam Speaker, the authority to establish ward boundaries and also the authority to set the composition of council have been removed, yes.
And has that been removed for any other municipality in the province of Ontario?
No.
And is this, has this ever happened before outside of the amalgamation where those wards were set in any of the legacy cities, including old City of Toronto?
There was a time between amalgamation and the City of Toronto Act when Toronto was the only municipality that lacked authority to establish ward boundaries.
And that was due to amalgamation. And then
only
the city,
Toronto.
pardon me?
That was also only Toronto.
And there's the City of Toronto Act itself. And when was that? That was undertaken under the Miller government in negotiations with Queen's Park. It's a pretty substantive act, is it not?
Yes, it is.
That gives us fairly wide-ranging powers that acknowledge the fact that we're a mature city with a mature level of government.
Through you, Madam Speaker, yes, the City of Toronto Act that came into force in 2006 does state in its preamble that it does in its preamble recognize the city as a mature government, and it also gives the city very broad powers to deal with local issues as council sees fit.
And then, has that been amended as well?
Yes.
So the government has amended the City of Toronto Act, which is its covenant with this city, to eliminate certain powers from our purview.
Yes, through you, Madam Speaker, the powers to establish ward boundaries and council composition were found in the City of Toronto Act, so they've been removed from it.
And within the City of Toronto Act and its accompanying kind of regulations as to how it will be administered, there's fairly deep discussion about the amount of consultation that's expected to make changes.
Through you, Madam Speaker, the City of Toronto Act speaks to a commitment to consult on issues of significance to the city and to the province, and also refers to an agreement between the city and the province, which, following enactment of the City of Toronto Act, was written and entered into between the city and the province for the purpose of putting a framework around the consultation process.
So we have a consultation framework with the Ontario government that was ignored prior to this trusteeship on elections.
To my knowledge, there was no consultation under the TOCA, which is what we call the agreement, prior to introduction of this bill.
City Manager, was there any consultation based on the framework agreement in the City of Toronto?
Through the speaker, no, not with me.
There was not, and perhaps the clerk, was there any consultation on any of this, Madam Clerk?
Not prior to the enactment of the act, no.
No, just while you're here, we had to establish our awards. We were under a lot of pressure, from you actually, to establish our new wards before 2018 in order to be legal for the 2018 election, as I recall. Is that why you urged us to have our decision in 2017 or 2016 and to make any other decisions that would enable you to have this legal framework for the election?
Yes, that's correct. I've been encouraging council for several terms now to look at its ward structure to ensure that there was effective representation.
But you told us that we had to have our decision made at a certain point because we could not change ward boundaries during an election year. That was your advice to us.
Yes, that's correct. It's very hard to conduct an election when you change the very basic element that is required for that election.
Not legally, somewhere it was required that we were not allowed to do that. Would that be in the
Yes, the legislation established a deadline for doing that.
Legislation
So it had
for
to
all-
be done
for
prior
all-
to this year.
Councillor Fletcher, that was your last
Yes.
question. Thank you. Councillor Mammoliti?
Yeah, I'm just going to follow up on the last time we got advice from the clerk. Since then, you've had some ongoing discussions with the province with respect to the legislation. Are you a little more comfortable than you were prior to these discussions with the provincial folks?
Madam Speaker, we have had extensive consultation with all of our partners. We have had discussions with the ministry. We have had extensive discussions and received phenomenal support from Elections Ontario, who provided us with information on the basis of the 25 jurisdiction model. We had support from all of our various partners, MPAC notably. We had support from our vendors, and certainly our IT people have been phenomenal, and I can't thank them enough. We've also had support from all of our staff, our incredibly hard-working and diligent city staff and election staff to make this work.
So are we ready at all levels to go right now? Are you comfortable that we can actually move into the election with all the information being provided with reasonable time to all candidates?
Recognizing that there is an incredible amount of work in front of us because we are working in a very compressed time frame. Yes, I believe that I can meet the principles of the Act, which require me to conduct the election with utmost integrity.
Okay, so we can actually have an election in October 22nd, as it stands right now, and we're all relatively comfortable.
We are as comfortable as I can be. I believe that staff are in a position with our various partners and vendors and the election day staff to make this as ready as we can be. It is not going to be easy.
So my next question is just with respect to the Toronto Act, with the government's ability to amend. Government of Ontario has the right to amend legislation based on its procedures in the legislature. Am I correct to say that?
Oh, sorry. Yes, that's generally speaking, that's correct.
Did they follow the correct procedure in the Ontario legislature in order to change the acts necessary to have this election moving forward?
That possibly could be asked in camera, Councillor Mammoliti.
Has anybody stopped the legislature by using its process, its current process, in order to stop the bill in the legislature itself? Has it carried in the legislature as law?
It has received royal assent, yes.
That means that's the law we're dealing with today, right?
Yes.
All right. So we went from moving with 47 councillors, and within a month or so, we are now looking at an election of 25, and we are ready to go with an election. If we stall here at the City of Toronto by using whatever mechanism some people might want, we're going to go right back to the square one. How much more difficult might that be if this thing takes another month? And can we run an election if that's the case?
I am absolutely not confident at this point that I can turn this around with as much support as I can find anywhere, because we would have to go back to the very basic geography. There is, although we were locked down when the legislation passed at 47,
okay,
there is simply too much more to do.
If there's an attempt to go back again, yet again, it becomes even more difficult to run a municipal election.
Okay, that was your last question. That was your last question. Councillor Davis. No, hold
Yes,
on,
the
hold on,
time
Coun-
frames are too compressed.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Davis?
I wanted to ask questions about the process we used to establish the 47 ward structure. And I want to understand, what were the key elements that were looked at for establishing what is effective representation, and why did we use that process? Could you stop the clock?
Through you, Madam Speaker, there was a long process leading up to the passage of the 47-ward structure. We had a 4-year study process with outside consultants. They made recommendations to this body. This body sent them back again and again for further study and review. Ultimately, in November of 2016, this body adopted a 47-ward structure. The bills were passed in April of 2017. Those bills were appealed by 6 appellants to the Ontario Municipal Board, as it then was. We had an OMB hearing in October of 2017. We won the hearing. There was a 47-ward option approved. That was in place on December the 15th, 2017. Right. Ultimately, that was appealed to Divisional Court, and again, we were successful in Divisional Court in upholding that 47-ward structure.
And what I asked was, why did we use the process we did, and what were the key factors we looked at to ensure that the model that was brought forward was representative of the notion of effective representation? And where did the notion of effective representation come from?
It comes from the Supreme Court of Canada decision known as Carter versus Saskatchewan, and it establishes a number of tests and things that must be looked at when determining what constitutes effective representation when establishing the geography of ward boundaries.
So the Supreme Court sets out, and we followed, a process that would ensure that we provided the best possible option to deliver parity and effective representation for the people of Toronto.
The Supreme Court establishes
Yes.
a number of tests for determining effective representation, including voter parity, preserving communities of interest, protecting geographic boundaries, and what the Ontario Municipal Board determined with regard to the 47-ward option was that our version did in fact meet the test of effective representation.
And has the provincial government's legislation in any way met any of those tests? I heard a quiet no. Could I get a loud no?
Not in public. That's something we should discuss in camera.
Yes, please.
I think it's pretty clear that they have not. Has the provincial government undertaken a process to assess whether or not there was effective representation that engaged the public?
Councillor Davis, that's in camera, please.
That is a perfectly public question. Have they done that?
Councillor Davis, I said in camera, please.
Fair enough. The Carter decision of the Supreme Court of Canada does not require a process. It simply requires that the test of effective representation be met.
Okay, and I will ask the rest of the question in public. I did want to ask about the clerk. I want to ask the clerk a process question. We have been awarded, I believe, or at least recognized for all of the accessibility elements in our elections. We have used accessible communication strategies. We have done outreach. We have had extensive advanced polling. We have ensured all of those accessibility elements are met. Will they be met in this 25 ward model?
Through this speaker, one of the key principles that we're required to uphold when administering a municipal election is that it must be accessible to voters. So when we looked at moving to a 25 ward option, one of the key components that we wanted to assure ourselves of is that we would still be able to meet our accessibility standards, and we certainly plan to do so.
Thank you. That was your last question. Councillor Doucette.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to go back to the process we have spent 4 years going through, please. When was the last time we did ward boundary changes? Before this time, sorry. Thank you.
This is the first time the amalgamated city has used the powers to establish its own ward boundaries.
Before Bill 5, does the province say anywhere how often a city must review ward boundaries or how many residents should be within a ward? Is there anything out there? Or was there anything out there?
There was nothing in the legislation, no.
So they don't say to us, when you get to 110 or 109,000 residents, you must reestablish and rechange your boundaries?
The legislation does not require that, no.
Okay, interesting. So we spent 4 years doing this process. I've heard that, wonderful, lots of consultation, and we came up with a 47. Council approved it, OMB supported it, Supreme Court supported it, came back here, we supported it, and that's where we were. That's correct?
Just to be clear about the Supreme Court, that decision was not dealing with municipal ward boundaries. However, the test from it has been applied by the OMB and the Divisional Court. It's been accepted as the appropriate test for municipal ward boundary decisions.
And one of the things we were looking at for effective representation on page 3, on the pink papers, not the purple papers, it talks about we were targeting our wards to roughly 61,000 residents. Because we felt, am I correct, we felt that would be effective representation.
For you, Madam Speaker, I believe that was the view of the consultants, the experts that were hired by the city to do the review. Mm-hmm. Is that correct? That was their view.
Now going a little bit to accessibility during an election, if we have to run at 25 versus 47, do we have to change our polling stations? Or will we be using the same polling stations?
No, we need to go back and make sure that the voting subdivision boundaries fit within the 25, so there are some changes that need to be made to the voting stations.
And continue to the clerk. So we've heard again that we had to know how many wards we were doing by the end of last year to give you as many months as possible. You said you needed a maximum amount of time to run an election.
That's correct, and remember also that the legislation that we work under was just changed recently.
Right, appreciate that. But you were working on 47 for what, 8 months? And when did you actually switch from working on 47 to the 25?
When the bill was passed on whatever date that was, August the 14th.
Oh, sorry, 14th, that's right, August, was it August 14th? Okay, I had the 30, okay, you're right, yep, sorry. Legislation actually passed on August 14th. So you were still working on everything up till August 14th?
We froze effectively the work that we were doing on 47 at that time, yes.
So even after July 27th, where we heard that this was coming forward, you continued working and gathering all the information you needed to continue going for 47. Is that correct?
Yes, we did.
Did you also receive everything you needed from the province to continue doing at 47?
At that point, we were not requiring anything of the province.
At the last meeting, you mentioned that on the following Tuesday, July 31st, you would be receiving the voters' lists. Is that
Oh, that's right, the preliminary list of electors. That's correct, from MPAC, not the province.
Oh, sorry. I think the MPAC is province, but anyway, that's probably me. Did we receive that voters' list on July 31st?
Yes, we did, which is the earliest date that the legislation would allow us to receive that.
And the plan was then to get that voters list to the candidates on what, September 4th, 3rd, 4th?
Through the Speaker, we were planning on releasing the voters list to candidates on September 4th. The reason that we get it from MPAC on July 31st is we require a lot of cleaning of the list before it's ready for public consumption. So we go through it and remove deceased electors, duplicate records, that kind of thing.
Thank you. Councillor Pasternak?
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. Through you to staff, during the ward boundary review, it was we were repeatedly reminded of Carter versus Saskatchewan, which coined the phrase effective representation. Now, it seems to me the first condition of the courts is voter parity, equal number of voters in each electoral district. But then the decision goes on to talk about communities of interest, community history, minority representation, and projected population growth is also criteria. Under the 25-ward system, are we meeting the Supreme Court guidelines that we were told repeatedly during ward boundary review that we had to?
The ward boundary consultants hired by the city did look at that question, and if we were going to have any more detailed response, I would suggest you go in camera.
Fair enough. My next question is for the city manager. I think within the city manager's portfolio, and I feel a little uneasy because you're new asking this question, but there's an intergovernmental team, I think, under your jurisdiction. Is that a fair?
Through the Speaker, yes, there is.
I don't know how big that team is, but if you look at municipalities across the Western world, there are dozens of different formulations of representation. They're rarely referred to as city councilors, actually. There's a wide range of references. This legislation talks about city councilors. Did anyone ever talk about the borough president model in New York City, a community council, elected chair, councilors at large, but not called councilors, representatives at large? Did we explore added representation in a formula that actually does not violate the legislation?
So if I can, through the Speaker, I mean, that was a fairly detailed question. I think the person who would probably best be able to answer that is Fiona Murray.
Through the Speaker, Councillor, we have looked historically when we do governance research in the City Manager's office at other governance options and opportunities, like the way that they organize themselves in New York City and London. I mean, to do any level of deep analysis or research really needs to be part of an overarching governance review. And the last time the city did a governance review, we did look at some of those options, but at that time, they weren't pursued further.
Would elected community chairs or representatives at large be in violation of the legislation, or is that an in-camera question?
That's something that would have to be looked at in a governance review. And Madam Speaker, I'm not sure that topic's before us today.
I thought that's all we're talking about is elected representatives and our electoral system. But another question: the Federal Electoral Boundaries Commission and the Electoral Boundaries Readjustment Act sort of sets the numbers of federal ridings. If they decide to go up by 5 in the future, or 6 or 7 or 10, would we automatically follow suit, since federal ward boundaries seems to be the calling of the day?
Under Bill 5, Madam Speaker, that is what's provided for.
So we would follow their direction. If they went up, we would go up. I doubt they'll go down because it's population growth, but.
Yes, that's correct.
So my next question is for the clerk. Candidates, hundreds of them across the city, have been promised ward lists, I guess electoral lists in the combined formula, I guess of 25. They've been promised lists and maps by, I don't know, September 1st is what's come across my desk. Is that realistic to have all of that ready for all registered candidates by September the 1st?
That date, Madam Speaker, was changed in one of the regulations by the province. It is now a date of September 17th.
So voters lists and ward maps will be available on September 17th, and the election is October 22nd. In your opinion, is that really a fair opportunity for candidates to be campaigning? Does that sound?
Councillor, I can't answer that question. My job is to administer the legislation that is put before me.
Okay, final question. Maybe it's to the city manager. We've spent millions of dollars preparing for 47 wards. We spent over $1 million to consultants.
Councillor Pasternak, your time is up. Councillor Wong Tam.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Just to clarify, because I've heard a number of years and the consultation process being assigned different amounts of time. Is it true that from start to finish, the Toronto Ward Boundary Review took approximately 5 years before we concluded with a 47-ward option?
That's correct, Madam Speaker. From the time that we retained consultants to the time of the Ontario Municipal Board decision and ultimately through the court process, it was in excess of 5 years.
And why did we retain consultants? Because we do have city staff that are quite capable of doing this work. Why was it important for us to hire third-party consultants?
It was very important to staff and council that the process be third-party and be at arm's length from staff and council.
And did the third-party consultant, were they given any supervision through any type of advisory panel?
Through the Speaker, for the ward boundary review, we had an internal staff steering committee that we worked with closely. We met the consultants on a monthly basis, essentially really to give them access to city information that they required to do their study. In addition, they had an external expert panel that they used to bounce ideas off of that included academics, municipal lawyers, and other electoral experts.
So this third-party independent reviewer had internal advisory panel as well as an external advisory panel with subject matter experts.
That's correct, Councillor.
And is it true that they held over 100 face-to-face meetings with various members of council, school boards, and other stakeholder groups, as well as 24 public meetings, information sessions that led them to produce 7 substantial reports?
That's correct.
And each one of those reports, I guess one of them is the background research report. And that background research report, why was it important to do that? Because it takes a look at ward history, OMB decisions, projected development, electoral issues. Why did they put together that report?
Through the Speaker, that was kind of their kickoff preliminary foundation research that they felt was important, so they had the context before they started consultation on the current 44 ward model. They wanted to ensure that they understood our history, our context, so that they were well versed and had deep expertise and knowledge before they went any further.
Thank you. And with respect to the ward boundary review, the consultants also did put forth a consideration for a 25 ward structure that would have followed the federal boundaries. Is that not correct?
Through the Speaker, that is correct.
And was there a lot of support for that in the public, or perhaps even within the group of academics and expert advisors?
Through the Speaker, I don't have those numbers in front of me, Councillor. I mean, ultimately, that wasn't an option that Council pursued.
But is it not true that the general public in the report said that there was little support for that outcome?
So again, Councillor, I don't have those numbers right in front of me. I'd have to look them up. But, you know, at the end of the day, Council adopted a 47 ward model.
Thank you very much. That's helpful. With respect to the claims that $25 million will be saved over a 4-year period, how is that substantiated, and how did that information come about?
Councillor, I don't have those numbers in front of me, but I'm not sure how the province arrived at those figures, but they are actually not far off from our own calculations.
Is that including the elimination of the staff budgets that all councillors have? For example, we may have 5 or 6 staff in our office. Is that the elimination of that as well?
No. What we did was compare apples to apples. We did not make any exceptions for staffing.
And with respect to and those are very interesting answers, but with respect to well, because the numbers just don't add up, so that's why I'm asking. With respect to the additional costs the City of Toronto will bear because of the change to the electoral process, what is that additional cost that is before us now, and that you have to take out of the election reserve fund in order for us to change the elections?
So through the Speaker, we have estimated that in order to move to a 25 ward model this late in the election process, it will cost us approximately $2.5 million above and beyond our approved budget. It will cost us approximately an additional $2.5 million above and beyond our already approved annual budget for the election.
Thank you. Councillor Cressy.
Thank you, Speaker. I'll direct this to either the city manager or the city solicitor as you see fit. Can the City of Toronto simply ignore Bill 5 and proceed with a 47 ward election?
For you, Madam Speaker, no,
Why not?
because it is the law and the clerk is required to administer the election in accordance with the law at the time.
If City Council were to direct the clerk's office to run a 47 ward election, given that that election was already underway as of May 1st, could we do that?
Through you, Madam Speaker, the City Council lacks authority to do that. The clerk is an independent statutory official under the Municipal Elections Act with obligations under that statute and would actually have to ignore that sort of a direction.
So if that direction were provided by this council, if I understand correctly, the clerk would not follow it.
Well, I can't speak for the clerk, Madam Speaker, but that would put the clerk in an untenable position because the clerk is required to administer the election in accordance with the Municipal Elections Act of the day.
Okay. So that's as the city solicitor. So if I could ask the clerk, if City Council were to direct you to conduct the 47-ward election that was already underway, which we determined the boundaries of, would you conduct that election?
No.
Okay.
I am not allowed to do that. My obligation is now under Bill 5, as it was enacted on August the 14th.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Matlow?
Madam Speaker, to the clerk, I have a motion to request that you, while you have to adhere to Bill 5, that you also continue to prepare the 47-ward option in case we are successful in our court challenge, along with the resources necessary to do it. Earlier, the Speaker ruled that any instruction to the clerk would be ruled out of order. What I need to understand from you is, if the fact remains that council, not the candidates, but council before the election year, already directed you to do a 47-ward model and administer a 47-ward election, if we were to simply tell you to, or request that you continue that as an option, so that if we are successful in court, that it be prepared and ready to go, why would you not do that, or would you do it?
Through the Speaker, Councillor, the Municipal Elections Act gives Council very limited discretion over directing the clerk in undertaking and conducting an election. We took extraordinary efforts in order to develop a plan that we could implement with confidence and still assure the integrity of our election in the last few weeks on a 25-ward basis. I think our report before you today was quite clear in that we would find it incredibly challenging and the risks would be substantial for us to then revert back to a 47 in the event there is a successful court challenge.
I appreciate that it would be challenging, that you are concerned about it. But as the representatives of Toronto, if we decide to take a stand, to challenge Premier Ford, to challenge Bill 5, and if we are successful, then would it not be responsible, at the very least, to have the 47 model there, ready, prepared, to move forward with, as long as we provide you the resources to ensure that that is there as an alternate option?
You can go ahead if you want.
And by the way, if I can just add on to that, we would not in that motion in any way suggest that you not adhere to Bill 5, fulfill your responsibilities under the Act. What we would be saying to you is, continue the work that this council already requested that you do, to have it prepared for the possibility of a successful court challenge to ensure that that election take place.
Madam Speaker, there simply is not the ability, with the integrity and security of the election principles that I refer to, that I must adhere to conduct two different elections at the same time. We further risk confusing the public, confusing candidates, confusing our workers, all of whom need to be trained, and I need to have somewhere in the order of 16 or 17,000 people ready to administer an election on October. The earliest advance vote date is October the 6th. It's simply not feasible to run systems and do all the preparation work for two at the same time. The law is 25.
Madam Speaker, I'm not actually asking about running two elections at the same time.
Councillor Matlow, I believe the staff have answered the question 3 times.
No.
And,
If I could
the
clarify,
city
Madam
solicitor has a comment.
When I said earlier that council lacks authority to give direction to the city clerk regarding the administration of the election, that would also include lacking the authority to give direction to the city clerk to proceed along the 47-ward model simultaneously with the 25. And just to be clear, there's been some suggestion that council directed the clerk to prepare for the election with 47 wards. What council actually did was exercise its authority under the City of Toronto Act, as it then was, to establish ward boundaries and the composition of council. The
Madam
authority for the clerk to conduct the election flows from the province through the Municipal Elections Act.
Madam Speaker, I'm not actually asking about two parallel elections at the same time. What I'm asking about is having that contingency plan prepared and ready, not to confuse anyone. I think Doug Ford has already confused enough people himself.
Okay,
What I'm-
Counselor, that was your last question, Counselor Matlow. No, but Counselor Matlow, you've asked that question before. Want to just answer that?
Through the Speaker, so Councillor, administering an election of the magnitude, size, and complexity of Toronto is a million different details that one has to organize and oversee and administer. And we don't feel that we have the capacity to be administering on a 25-ward basis in such compressed timelines, while at the same time preparing ourselves under a 47. Because the geography of an election is your starting point for all your other planning and processes. So your geography becomes your fundamental beginning point for your staffing models, your voting places, your warehouse packing, your distribution centers, everything. So in order to plan for 47 while you're administering a 25 would essentially be doing two elections at one time in order to get 1 million little details organized under both those scenarios and get ready to go. And again, in our view, we have done a very deep dive on this. We appreciate the interest of this council, but in our view, we do not have the confidence that we could assure the integrity to do that at this moment in time.
Thank you. I believe that question's been answered numerous times. Counselor Palacio?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My questions are to the clerk and to the solicitor. So here we have two models that there has been a lot of discussions in terms of 25 and 47. So are you ready for the 25 model under Bill?
No more so than I would be for 47, but I'm certainly working on the 25-ward implementation, and we will be ready to conduct the election in accordance with the timeframes.
So you have all the tools, all the data, all the manpower, the polling stations, everything that's required to move forward?
Yes.
With the 25 model?
Yes, Councillor.
Great. Now, the purpose of the Municipal Elections Act is to ensure that the integrity and the confidence of the electoral process is not compromised in any way. And in your report, the yellow pages, you are alluding to that aspect. If there was a change between the 25 and the 47, can you just elaborate to that aspect, please?
Through the Speaker, Councillor, when Bill 5 was introduced and it looked like there may be a move to a 25-ward model, the clerk and her election staff took extraordinary efforts over a very short period of time to develop a 25-ward contingency plan that we feel quite confident in administering. If we reverted back to a 47 model in the event that the court challenge was successful, our view is that we do not have sufficient time to undertake that change and administer the election with confidence and integrity on October 22nd.
Thank you. So within the report, you are stating that if that was to happen, if you were to revert back to the 47 model, that that will compromise and will create an unacceptable and severely undermine the trust of the voters and candidates. So, which is something that's not quite clear, and the public has every right to understand what's happening in these council chambers as we move forward in terms of going with this discussion. Can you please elaborate, because that's at the heart of the discussion right now, to understand and to make sure that the system is not compromised in any way.
Through the Speaker, so Councillor, when we have undertaken very deep due diligence on our ability to revert back to a 47-ward model, and there are many steps that one is required to take in election administration. So the geography of your election is your foundation for all of your other planning processes. And we would have insufficient time to change all those processes, particularly related to ballot production. We quality test our ballots, and we do some fairly deep analysis to ensure the accuracy of our ballots. We have a complicated ballot. We're a big city. We produce over 2 million ballots, and if we reverted back to a 47, that would be 235 different ballot styles. That is a very complex print job that requires a lot of testing and quality assurance to ensure its accuracy. We also have to do end-to-end system tests of all of our information technology systems that support the election, particularly the results chain for results on election night. So those are some of the administrative details that we feel in a 47 model reverted back this late in the game, we would be unable to be confident to undertake.
Thanks so much. No further questions.
Thank you. Councillor Holliday?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Through you to, I think it's the clerk on this one. The report talks about an additional cost of $2.5 million to administer the changes. Can you elaborate just a little bit on what those costs are?
I can. Through the Speaker, the costs relate to overtime. So there certainly has been overtime that we've had to assume in the last 3 weeks in developing and implementing our contingency plan to move to a 25-ward model. We also had to retain and extend contracts of all of our system testers. Again, we have a fairly complex information technology system that supports election administration, and they all underwent privacy impact assessments, vulnerable risk assessments, and threat risk assessments. So some of that we've had to redo because we had to recode the back end. We also had to renegotiate some of our vendor contracts to meet different specifications and timelines that in effect cost us some extra money.
Thank you. Is most of that money already spent?
Not at this point, Councillor. We have probably expended to get ready, I would estimate, spent and committed about $300,000 to date.
Okay, thank you. This is a more general question for the clerk. I understand that a couple of the wards in the city currently have a much higher population. And would you agree that I think it's the material online says Ward 20 and Ward 23 have a current population of 95,000 according to the 2016 census?
Yes, that's my recollection, somewhere in that order.
Okay. Do you, through you to Madam Clerk, do you recall what council did to respond to the concerns of those councillors that approached council saying we have some higher population than everybody else? What did we do as a council?
Councillor, there was a formula that was adopted by council, and I don't remember it precisely, but it authorized the city manager to provide funds to those councillors to obtain additional assistance to run their offices, to deal with the extra population.
Right, so a handful of the wards in the city were able to hire additional constituency assistants. Can you tell me what is the general cost of a constituency assistant? I know there's a range, but do you have a planning figure in mind?
Not with me. I'd have to get that, Councillor.
Would it be fair to say it would be between 50 and 100,000 for a constituency?
That sounds about right.
Okay. So, so a few of the people that have a population of 95,000 now have an extra constituency assistant. The cost of that is between $50,000 to $100,000 each. Can you tell me, is there a general planning figure for the cost to run a councillor's office, including the administration of the office, the staff, the councillor themselves? Just a general figure. Is it $1 million, $500,000? Just a planning figure.
I don't recall off the top, Councillor.
Fair. Substantively more than the cost of an additional constituency assistant.
Yes.
So from a net financial basis, would you say that the changes that have been brought forward, even in light of the additional cost of $2.5 million, the city is actually saving some money?
It is possible, yes.
Thank you. I think my next question is for the solicitor. I just want to understand better, in the last paragraph of the first report, you mentioned a court challenge. A private citizen has applied to the courts, I guess to take some legal action. They've named us as a respondent. Can anyone give me some sense, if it's being heard on August 31st, what power the court has and how long it could take them to make a decision on this?
Just for clarity, Madam Speaker, so the city is a respondent in that application, so the
Okay.
city is already involved in that matter, and the question before council today is what role council would like legal services to take. The hearing is scheduled for August 31st. There are some other dates ahead of that for materials to be filed, and we have materials ready should we be instructed to file them. The court, the timing that the court will take to deliver a decision is really out of our hands, but certainly we could request an expedited decision.
Are we in trouble if our term ends November 30th and there isn't an election, there isn't a decision? Do councillors extend, indefinitely until something is resolved? Like, what is the possible risk or outcome of a court challenge that drags on? We have a government.
Through you, Madam Speaker, we would request an expedited decision, so I don't have concerns about that.
That was your last question. Councillor Shan?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Through you to the clerk's office. On July 30th, on Monday, a communication was sent from the deputy city clerk saying to candidates that the current legislation at that time, not Bill 5, previous legislation would be followed in accordance, and this email was sent to all the candidates. So am I safe to assume that between Monday, July, or from the 27th, when the talk was happening, till August 14th, that you were continuing to prepare for a 47-ward election?
Through the Speaker, that's correct, Councillor. We would be obligated to continue to administer the election under 47 until Bill 5 received royal assent.
So until last week, you were going forward with 47. Now, I want to understand the context of the contingency plan that you had. When I heard at one point there was nothing being done on the 25 model until the legislation passed, and then there's also some talk about some work being done preparing for 25 models. How long ago that work started?
Through the Speaker, so Councillor, when Bill 5 was introduced in the legislature, my staff and I did begin some fairly intense contingency planning right away and have continued to do that contingency planning over the last 3 weeks. At the same time, while we continued to administer the election under 47 and ensured that we secured all of the data and information related to the 47 while we started to move forward on planning on a 25-ward basis.
So during the time when Bill 5 was not law, contingency plan was happening, how is this any different from what Councillor Madler was asking when a contingency plan for the other models still continue to happen? Because I see that you actually, when the legislation was not Bill 5, you actually went ahead with starting to plan for Bill 5. And why not this contingency plan be prepared for moving forward for the 47 model? Because it doesn't seem to be a contradiction to me. Both seems to be kind of along the same line.
Through the Speaker, the clerk is required to follow the Municipal Elections Act. So when the provincial government suggested and introduced changes to the Municipal Act, the clerk is required to prepare for those in order to administer that on October 22nd. I can't emphasize strongly enough the extraordinary efforts we had to go through in order to, during an election period, after we had certified our candidates and nominations had closed, to develop a contingency plan that still gave us confidence that we could administer the election on October 22nd with integrity. My staff and I have worked 18-hour days for the last 3 weeks. We got extraordinary assistance from MPAC and Elections Ontario and other stakeholders and partners that enabled us to, quite frankly, do the impossible.
The question about the voters list, I hear that the list is going to be available for on September 17th. That is about 13 days after when candidates were originally promised. Now, candidates are going to have the list that is almost double the size, in some cases triple the size, with 10 less days to prepare. Do you think that would constitute to a fair election for candidates who are getting this massive list with about 3 weeks before advance poll?
Councillor, we are required to follow the law as it is at the time. I can't comment on your ability or not ability or inability as a candidate to campaign during that period.
What do we understand the purpose of giving a list is to conduct a fair election? I would assume that's the reason why we give the list in timely manner.
The purpose of the list is to advise candidates of who is eligible to vote in their wards.
And the timing of the list being given at certain time is to make sure that there is fair election. I would assume that, because otherwise the incumbents who would have ran before would have had an advantage of the list, I'm assuming.
We really cannot answer that question.
Okay. So 10 days, I understand we have to, your role is to implement the legislation, but your role also is to conduct a fair election. Do you think it's fair that candidates are getting triple the list or double the list of people with 10 less days moving towards the election?
Madam Speaker, I can't address the issue of legislative fairness. I only have a job to do in accordance with the legislation.
Thank you.
That's not a question to the clerk. Councillor DiCiano.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm just going to get to the nuts and bolts on this whole court challenge. So in the event that the court hears a challenge or our challenge and they rule in favor of it, the province can then appeal that or not?
There would be an opening to appeal, yes.
Okay, so that opening further delays a court decision, correct?
I'm going to suggest that questions of this nature would best be addressed in camera.
In camera, Councillor DiCiano.
Okay, generally speaking, a decision of any court, if there is an appeal of any decision of any court in Canada, does that delay the decision of that body? Generally speaking, in law in Canada.
Yes
so
and
if
no.
someone were to
I'm
sue,
going to say,
yes.
through you, Madam Speaker, the answer is yes and
Thank you.
no.
Sorry, yes and no?
And there are, sometimes orders are stayed, and that's something we could
Okay.
discuss in camera.
In the meantime, if we were successful in court and there was an appeal, Bill 5 remains the law of the land. Is that correct?
And I'm going to suggest, Madam Speaker, that that is also an in-camera question.
Okay, let me put it another way. If it remained, in the chance that it remains the law of the land because of an appeal or a challenge, city clerks would continue to run on a 25 award system, right? They would continue to organize an election based on a 25 award system. Is that correct?
Through you, Madam Speaker, the city clerk would be required, as she is now, to administer the election in accordance with the legislation that is in place at the time.
Right, and I think your comments, oh, no, wait, that's in camera, so I won't talk about that. You have said that, Etobicoke York Community Council in July of this year unanimously passed a motion to consult our constituents on the 47 ward configuration. Isn't it true that this council said no to allowing that consultation? It's totally before us. Did this council say no to allowing all of the Etobicoke wards Etobicoke York wards to be consulted.
Through you, Madam Speaker, I'm not able to answer that question. It's not really a legal question. I don't know if any other staff have that information before them.
I don't believe the solicitor has that answer to that question. Just a
Okay.
sec, we're in the middle of asking questions, Counselor. Do you want to allow Counselor DiGiano to finish?
Can you hold my time, Madam Speaker?
Okay, point of privilege, Counselor Mamlidi.
Yeah, the solicitor had said she doesn't have the information. I'd point you to a recommendation that Community Council had made with a motion that I'd passed unanimously. This council said
Okay,
no to
Counselor
the...
Mamlidi, that's not a point of privilege. Okay, Counselor DiGiano, continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the city clerk, during amalgamation, it was pretty clear that the courts ruled clearly that city residents are not entitled to consultation within the Constitution. Is that correct? That was a decision by the courts. That's public knowledge. The decision by the courts during amalgamation, and I believe it was upheld by the Superior Court, or the Superior Court. Is that correct?
Through you, Madam Speaker, could you please repeat the question?
During, there's a long history with court decisions that show cities are not entitled to consultation when changing legislation. Is that correct? When provinces change legislation?
The province.
And that happened during
was one of the
amalgamation?
issues discussed in the East York case, yes.
Okay. And those cases have been those decisions have been upheld even at the Superior Court?
Well, through you, Madam Speaker, that issue, that case really addressed the particular context at that time. It was around amalgamation.
Right. Okay, those are my questions for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Mamlidi, point of privilege.
I know, Madam Speaker, just bear with me. The solicitor said she doesn't have the information. It's right here where Community Council wanted consultation on the ward boundary issue. Council, through a motion through Councillor Carroll, objected and did not want that consultation.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to give it to the solicitor now.
Yes. Counselor Perks,
Through
question.
you, Madam Speaker, I don't see this as a legal question.
No,
so-
it's not.
Yes, thank
It's
you.
not. You can give it to the clerk, actually, not the solicitor. Counselor Perks.
Thank you. First, maybe I'll follow up on the question that Councillor Mamlidi and DiGiano seem so excited about. The question of whether or not we conducted sufficient consultation was considered by Council, by the Ontario Municipal Board, and by the Superior Court of Ontario, and all three cases they found that we did. Is that correct?
That's correct. That was a live issue before both the courts and the Ontario Municipal Board.
Oh, I'm so relieved.
Please, no disruptions.
Thank you. To the clerk. So I'm not asking the question that Councillor Shan was asking about whether or not it's fair. I just want to understand factually. The voters list will be made available to candidates later in the process than it was during the last election. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. In addition, the information to the public about the advance voting days will be made available to the public later in the process during this election than it was during the last one. Is that correct?
Yes, it has to be taken into account in the planning that we're doing to run the 25 and to determine when we would be capable of holding those under in accordance with the integrity principles.
Thank you. Are there other elements about this election for 25 which are not up to the same standard as we achieved in the previous election?
Through the Speaker, no, I don't believe so, Councillor. We have been very careful to ensure that all of our accommodation, communication, and planning is meeting best practice election administration.
I didn't ask about best practice. I asked if they were up to the same standard as last time.
Yes, they are.
Okay, so the only two that are not up to the same standard are the access to the voters list and the information to the public about advance days.
Councillor, I can't definitively answer that question as we're still busily trying to implement this, but those are two that come to mind immediately.
Two that come to mind. Can we guarantee there will be as many days or hours of advanced voting as there were in the last election?
Through the Speaker, Councillor, we're currently undertaking a detailed analysis of our capacity to conduct advanced vote, and we haven't quite determined what that might look like. We're doing our best so that we don't have an impact on advanced vote, but there are some challenges given that nominations close September 14th at 2 p.m. and advanced vote starts on October 6th in our current scenario with producing ballots in time.
In 3 weeks, essentially.
Yes.
Yeah. So, okay. So we can't yet tell the public whether they will receive as many opportunities to participate in advanced vote as they did in the previous election.
Through the Speaker, again, we're undertaking that assessment, and we're not quite sure yet.
We don't have an answer today.
That's right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Shiner.
To the city clerk. Madam Clerk, just so I understand, when we last discussed this, there was a lot of concern that you wouldn't be able to be ready for the election, and I believe your report says you can now. And going back, and I think this was asked earlier, it would be even more work to go back to anything other than the 25. That being the case, and the fact that the province really held an election using those ward boundaries, have you been in touch with the province, the provincial folks that manage their elections, or have they been in touch with you to provide some assistance?
Yes, the province contacted us immediately upon the introduction and discussed with us when the timelines, how the timelines would need to change in order to implement the legislation. And they then drafted the regulations. I can't say enough about how Elections Ontario stepped forward to provide us with the revised voters list for 25 wards. They also provided us with additional assistance on the voting subdivisions which they used, the staffing models with which they have utilized for their voting places. MPAC was incredibly proactive in providing us with all of the information that we requested. The school boards provided their information in a very timely manner. Staff in the city, in particular IT and others, have been incredibly supportive. And our own election services staff, as Ms. Murray has indicated, have worked 18-hour days plus since this has happened.
So an awful lot was put upon you. Have you, by the province, have you ever had as much cooperation or organization with them in the past in regards to getting ready for an election?
While the province generally is cooperative, Councillor, we've never had a need for this much support, but it has been given freely.
Thank you.
Of course. Grease the wheels. They did.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you very much, Speaker. Through you to the clerk, or maybe to the city solicitor. The CODA agreement between the province and the City of Toronto, what aspect of that has been breached with respect to Bill 5?
The agreement speaks to consultation on issues of significance to both parties.
Right. And so is there a penalty aspect with respect to this breach that you speak of with respect to consultation?
No, there's not.
Right. So nothing can be done.
I'm not prepared to go that far.
So maybe I'll ask that question in camera then. With respect to the city clerk, Madam Clerk, through you, Speaker, You have given us an overview with respect to the challenges and so on that you would face with respect to a 25 electoral system. Obviously, you would face challenge with respect to 47. Is that correct?
Yes, as Ms. Murray has explained, the difficulty is that we would be asked to move backwards and forwards at the same time because we have to go back and sort out the electoral geography and various assigning voters into their proper voting stations, which would have to be reconfigured and re-permitted and inspected for accessibility. And then we would have to move forward from where we were on August the 14th. The problem is all electoral processes are interdependent, and it is not possible to go back and go forward at the same time.
Fair enough. Much has been said about effective representation and ineffective representation. Is that an issue of size?
Capacity to represent is one of the components of the Carter test.
Right.
And so the first principle is voter parity. Is your vote worth the same as an elector in another ward boundary? And so the Supreme Court has established a number of issues, one of which is capacity to represent. That is a function of the number of electors per ward.
Right. Through you, Madam Speaker, to the clerk, with respect to the number of electorate and so on. So looking at an area that I this morning actually signed to run in, Scarborough Centre, it'll be about 112,000 people, 600 give or take. I wanted to understand through you, Speaker, how will the mechanism and the system work with respect to 25, given that we have now, there's about 65,000 people. Will the staffing component be the same, and who will make those particular decisions? Will councillors be able to have the ability to have constituency offices in those areas if you don't have one now as a member of this council of 45? Who makes those decisions? Will be the clerks, city council, the premier, the legislature? Who will make those decisions?
Those decisions are entirely up to the council.
Which council? The new council? Would that be the new council?
They're decisions for council.
Okay, so the new council would make that particular decision. Okay.
Yes.
I think most of my other questions, Speaker, are actually in camera, so I'll wait till later.
Councillor Fillion?
Stop me if this is an in-camera question, of course, to the solicitor. An argument that might be used on the other side is that these boundaries work just fine for federal and provincial. Is there a very legitimate argument to be made that we are fundamentally different because we're not part of a political party system? Therefore, you don't have any platform that directs you how to consider each issue. Each councillor has to look at literally thousands of issues each year and make an independent opinion on that. Likewise, the electors need to consider multiple individual candidates, research them, and make an informed choice on their attributes as opposed to a political platform.
Through you, Madam Speaker, that is certainly an argument that could be made.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Councillor Fragadakis?
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. So through you to staff. So I understand that the city has entered into a confidential agreement with the provincial government in order to administer this 25 ward council, and I'm wondering if we could know details about that confidential agreement.
Through the Speaker, the City Clerk executed a data sharing agreement with the Chief Electoral Officer of Ontario that provided us some data and information on a 25 ward basis to assist us in our contingency plan. Some of the information included, for example, a shape file that they would use at a 25 geography that saved us about 4 days of work from creating it
So
ourselves.
did you get the same information for 47?
We did not, because they don't operate on a 47. They operate on a 25. So they were prepared to share their information on a 25 basis to assist us in our election administration.
So they only wanted to assist in the 25, but they weren't going to cut 4 days off and save us any effort on the 47.
We already had 47 councillors, so they were providing us information on the
In addition
electoral
to-
geography that they conduct their election under.
Okay.
Okay. Counselor Perks?
Yes, Speaker.
Motion to go in camera.
If I could have it.
If we can put it on
There
the
we go.
screen.
Thank you. I move that Council recess its public session to meet as committee of the whole in closed session to consider CC 45.1 legal options to challenge Bill 5, the Better Local Government Act. Those words are not accurate. 2018, reason for confidential information, litigation, or potential litigation that affects the City of Toronto, and advice or communications that are subject to solicitor-client privilege.
Okay, on favor, okay, recorded vote.
Speaker, my microphone.
Councillor Fillion, please.
The motion to resolve into closed session carries. The vote is 32 to 5.
Okay, if I can ask the members of the public and the media to please vacate the council chambers. Okay, this meeting is now resumed. City Council has started but not completed its closed session consideration of item CC 45.1, headed Legal Options to Challenge Bill 5, the Better Local Government Act 2018. No motions were made in closed session. We will now recess for lunch, and I would take a motion to resume in closed session when we reconvene at 2 p.m. Recess to 2 o'clock. All in favor?